Here's our top story. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is on a 5-day trip to the United States. Jaishankar met the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. The Secretary-General expressed solidarity with the government and the people of India in their efforts against the recent wave of COVID-19 pandemic. Antonio Guterres and Jaishankar also discussed major challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic and further underlined the need and the importance of finding urgent and effective global vaccine solutions. Jaishankar further appreciated the efforts of the Secretary-General to facilitate vaccines for all. EAM also apprised the Secretary-General of India's efforts to meet its Paris commitments, further conveying India's support to back Guterres for his second term. This is Jaishankar's first face-to-face interaction with the UN chief since India entered the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member. India's foreign minister interacted with permanent representative ambassador from India to the United Nations, T.S. Trimurti. Other officials and diplomats from India to the UN were also part of the meet. Mr. Jaishankar is also scheduled to hold a key bilateral meet with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington. Jaishankar and the Biden administration is expected to majorly focus their discussion on COVID-related cooperation. The key meeting is to ensure that supply of raw materials from the US for the manufacture of vaccines in India continues uninterrupted. India is likely to be one of the beneficiaries of the stock of vaccines US is willing to share with. The talks are expected to revolve around India's pitch to secure the unused vaccines, particularly AstraZeneca. New Delhi is also looking at joint production of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine in collaboration with the US in India and ways to help manufacturers like Serum Institute of India boost production. Remember, the US Embassy had already clarified that private sector production talks are underway between pharmaceutical companies in order to make this happen. Other bilateral issues are also likely to be on the agenda. The leaders are expected to discuss resilient global supply chains as well as the Indo-Pacific region in the backdrop of China's growing belligerence in the region. Mr. Jaishankar is also scheduled to meet US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, other senior officials of the Biden administration. The meeting is Mr. Jaishankar's first visit to the US since the new president, Joe Biden, assumed office in January. Now, for more on this story, we are being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibbal. Siddhant, firstly, we know that the external minister met UN Chief Antonio Guterres. Walk us through the highlights of this meeting, please.
Well, on the second day of his almost week-long visit, we know that the Indian External Affairs Minister had met the UN Secretary-General, and during that conversation, there was focus on the COVID crisis, on climate change, on India's presidency as the chair of the UNSC in the month of August, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and finally on the issue of terrorism. But the key focus was on India's presidency in August, when it will be chairing the UNSC, United Nations Security Council. Remember, India is a non-permanent member of the UNSC for a 2-year term period, and we have seen India speak at many occasions. In fact, India's External Affairs Minister himself has spoken at many occasions. On Africa was the recent time he spoke backing the African seat. But nonetheless, one significant thing that emerged was India extending its commitment for the backing of Antonio Guterres as the next UN SG, and the election, of course, are going to take place later this year. So his term begins 1st of January. But COVID crisis remains a top priority as well, given the fact that how this has been part of multilateral and bilateral conversation. Next focus will be in Washington, where he is likely to not only meet the counterpart, Secretary of State, but also the CEOs and chairperson of many pharma majors in United States.
Okay, Siddhant, you just mentioned that next in line would be to meet his counterpart, Antony Blinken, while he's in the US. What are the key issues likely to be discussed between the two in that meeting?
First, of course, as expected, it will be the COVID crisis, and also we know that just recently, United States announced that it will be giving a major chunk of AstraZeneca COVID vaccines to the world, and India could get that major share, given the fact that India is in need of vaccines for its own population, and not just own population, but for the countries in the region. Also, we know both India and United States are part of the Quad cooperation on COVID vaccines, and under the first meeting that took place in March, in fact, on 12th of March, it was decided that India will be the major production center of these vaccines. These will be Johnson & Johnson's vaccines, which will be produced here in India and given to many countries in the Indo-Pacific. But also, we know it is given that the aggressiveness by the Chinese, the Indo-Pacific vision, which of course both Washington and New Delhi back, will be major key areas of conversations. Also, as just a short while ago, I mentioned that he will be meeting the CEOs and chairpersons of major pharma companies as well. This could be Pfizer, this could be Moderna, and this could be Johnson & Johnson as well. Remember, ahead of his visit, the roadmap was laid by the Indian envoy to Washington, and he, of course, had met these officials, the pharma majors. This, of course, ahead of this visit. So this is not only a strong likelihood, but we could expect some kind of announcement as well when it comes to India-US cooperation on vaccines.
Right, that was Siddhant Sibal reporting live from New Delhi.